Coming up on Network Africa, Human Rights Watch accuses UK of crimes against humanity over a Chagos seizure. Wave of arrest by Tunisian security forces spark fears of measures against opponents of President Kais Saied. Last, Ugandan army denied torturing the opposition activist. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Anne Mwawade. We start with the Human Rights Watch, which has accused the UK of crimes against humanity and its refusal to allow a group of islanders to return to the Chagos archipelago region. Half a century after they were forced off the island by British troops, Human Rights Watch says that reparations should be paid to generations of people affected by this decision to depopulate the remote islands deep in the Indian Ocean. The UK's Foreign Office has responded by repeating its deepest regrets about the manner in which people were removed from the islands in the late 1960s and early 70s. But it stressed, quote, "We categorically reject the characterization of events as crimes against humanity." The HRW report comes as the UK is facing growing international condemnation for holding on to what it calls the British Indian Ocean Territory, with the UN's International Court of Justice ruling that the continuing British occupation of that region is illegal. The UN General Assembly has also voted overwhelmingly in favor of the islands being returned to Mauritius. The UK insists on keeping hold of the Chagos Islands, which it negotiated Mauritius's independence in 1968. Mauritian officials have since accused the UK of blackmailing them into relinquishing that territory. The UK had already entered into secret talks with the US to lease one of the islands, Diego Garcia, to Washington for use for a military base. And we now have our guest, Mr. Yinka Oyenichi. He's an international affairs analyst, and he's calling from Midlands in the UK. Thank you very much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me as well.
Thank you too. Now, why do you think this is coming up at this time after half a century, and what do you make of this development?
Oh, I don't think it's a coincidence. I suppose that everybody has come to the point where we agree that the slave trade shouldn't have happened. We also agree that we need to repatriate wealth, artifacts that have been stolen, unlawfully taken from different parts of the world. India is talking about its jewels having been appropriated for the use of the queen, the late queen, in our crown. And that has put a lot of question mark on whether that crown will still continue to be used, or that those questionable elements will be removed. It's the same thing. We've had the return of the Benin's bronze heads. So all over the world, it is time to start to compensate countries that have been victims of slave trade, of colonialism for so long. And this is not coming as a coincidence. I think that this is a lost battle that the UK is trying to fight regarding the archipelagos in Mauritius. And the earlier the government of the United Kingdom wakes up to smell the coffee, the better. They can't walk away from this. They can wish it away, and it's not something that can be negotiated. It's a good thing to see that Mauritius can stand up and fight for itself and have the support of non-aligned nations as well as some other global powers.
Where the indigenous people of Chagos were driven to, where do they live?
Sorry, say that again. I didn't get the question.
Can you tell us where the indigenous people of Chagos were driven to? Where do they live?
Oh, of course. I mean, these people were driven out of their normal homes, islands, and they were driven to other neighboring countries, and some had to probably even move overseas. And it's clear. I can't say it's not crime against humanity. What is the United Kingdom looking for? It's patently clear for everybody to see. It's to use the archipelagos as a military base, is to draw from the mineral resources under the sea. It's also, as much as possible, for the economic gains that there are, okay? We're talking about the seas which are rich, all right? We have neighboring countries, including Seychelles, and some other countries right there. who have also enjoyed some kind of freedom away from colonialism. So these people have been driven away from their heritage, from the place they call home. And you don't have to physically even evict people before you tell them they are not in control. I mean, I saw from your own news reports that the United Kingdom is standing against people returning to their homes. What do they think they are talking about, actually? All right. Is that a United Kingdom territory? It isn't. It's colonialism that has brought that. And it's time for people to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. So they've been driven from what they call their heritage. They don't have physical control. They don't have physical possession. They cannot lay claim. They cannot take benefit of the mineral resources. They cannot even hold on to this as a sovereign people. So it's not just physical eviction we are talking about. We are talking about mental degradation. We are talking about mental oppression, which the United Kingdom has done. And if they continue, then there's no other way to describe it than crimes against humanity. In fact, I believe that the United Kingdom is already in contempt of several judgments of the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, as well as other international organizations.
Mauritius is already claiming blackmail was used for them to relinquish Chagos. What method of blackmail would have been used?
Oh, of course. We are talking developing countries that rely on the developments that the Western powers can give you. Okay, so you are talking about maybe access to funding, all right? You are talking about aids. You are talking about economic benefits, which is the same thing that many African countries are still suffering from. We are somewhat tied to the apron strings of the Western powers. I mean, look at even the African Development Bank. Look at the benefits that should accrue to Africa from within. We are reliant on external bodies, on international funding agencies, to be able to even explore whatever economy we seem to have. We trade in dollar and pounds at the detriment of our own local currencies. So those are blackmail tools right there. You have them, okay? Technological transfer and all of that. You are tied to the one strings. You wait on them for some of these things that solutions that we can organically develop from within. So yes, blackmail at its best. Okay, because if you even have a judgment from the International Tribunal, why then would United Kingdom will be talking about diplomatic negotiations? You don't do that, okay? We have courts, we have heritage, we have the identity of our people. And it's actually commendable that right there in Mauritius, you are not talking about maybe war or breakdown of law and order already. So yes, it's different blackmail tools at different levels of international politics.
But Mauritius is in favor of the U.S. keeping Diego Garcia, one of the islands there. Why do you think this is so?
Well, I would question that. I would question whether the Mauritius will say that they want it to be a military base. There's nobody who will not enjoy on the face of it, enjoy having the U.S. military base, because security. It means that at that point you have some powers already military-wise. But it's not to say that that the United States is also taking ownership. If the United States is establishing a military base in Mauritius, then it has to be on the terms that the government and people of Mauritius have put on the table. Okay, the United States has quite a number of military bases all over the world, including the Middle East and Qatar. And Qatar has benefited from that, as you can see, military might, military supplies, being able to call on the United States military when it matters. But it then does not mean it is colonization 2.0 or 3.0. So if the United States is going to maintain a military base in Mauritius, it must not be seen as if the people of Mauritius are begging for United States to establish a base. No, it will be that United States will establish that base on the terms and conditions that the people of Mauritius have placed forward, and that can be exited at any time. Because, God forbid, whenever a war breaks out between US or Russia, or we have another world war, then it is a possibility that Mauritius may be a sitting duck. So Mauritius, the people of Mauritius must be able to serve the United States quick notice as at when they deem necessary.
All right. International Affairs Analyst Yinka Oyeniji, thank you so much for your time on Network Africa. Has been speaking to us from East Midlands in the UK. Thank you very much for your perspective.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great day.
On to Zimbabwe now, where the government-owned Herald News site reports that a light aircraft that crash-landed near the capital, Harare, was carrying diamonds which were being transported under heavy security. The plane crashed in an open field on Monday afternoon, and that's after a suspected engine fault. It had 5 people on board. Police say the diamonds were being transported from the mine in the southern region of Vjivane, is operated by the mining giant Murowa Limited. The company is quoted as confirming the crash, but it did not comment on the diamond consignment. The diamonds were secured at the crash site and transported back to Harare under security. A wave of arrests by Tunisian security forces had sparked fears that President Kais Saied is resorting to tougher measures against his opponents in the crisis-hit birthplace of the 2011 Arab uprising. The latest arrests, including senior figures in the Islamist-inspired party, come 1 year and a half after Mr. Saied sacked the government, froze parliament, and even seized far-reaching powers in what his rivals have described as a coup. While a number of Mr. Said's opponents have since been questioned or even placed on trial in military courts, the arrests of the head of the country's most popular radio station and a prominent businessman, along with several other public figures, appear to mark an escalation. Just 2 days ago, police arrested former Justice Minister Mr. Buhari and Mosaic FM director of Buta 2 days after the detention of tycoon Kamel El Latif, the former top Ennahda figure Abdul Hamid Jalassi, and political activist Kayam Turki. Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, is expressing his concern over the deepening crackdown against perceived political opponents and civil society in Tunisia, including thorough measures taken by the authorities that continue to undermine the independence of the judiciary. Since Saturday, at least 9 people, including former civil servants, have all been reportedly arrested and some even detained on security and graft charges. The UN Human Rights Office is calling on Tunisian authorities to respect due process and fair trial standards in all judicial proceedings and immediately release all those arbitrarily detained, including anyone detained in relation to exercising their rights to freedom of opinion or expression.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, today has expressed his concern over the deepening crackdown against perceived political opponents and civil society in Tunisia, including through measures taken by the authorities that continue to undermine the independence of the judiciary. The UN Human Rights Office has also observed that the General Prosecutor has increasingly initiated criminal proceedings against perceived opponents, charging them with conspiracy against state security, causing offence to the head of state, or violating the decree law to fight cybercrime. We are additionally concerned that some of those held on charges connected to criticising the government have been tried in military courts. We call on the authorities to cease immediately practices of trying civilians before military tribunals. We call on the authorities to work towards bringing the justice sector legislation, procedures and practices into line with applicable international norms and standards, and through the separation of powers to uphold the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law.
Still ahead on the program, children accused of witchcraft in eastern Congo find a safe haven. Bring you the details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. The Somali government has ordered telecommunication firms, money transfer banks and other business entities to register their businesses and clients with the authorities to curb money laundering and terrorism financing. In a news conference, Information Minister Daouda Wies also asked mobile service providers to register clients and collect their personal details, including fingerprints and photographs. The minister said the government's National Anti-Money Laundering and Countering The Financing of Terrorism Committee has also warned the public against aiding militants. He warned that any business or property found to be associated with the militants will be seized. As Somalia continues to experience a historic drought, pushing millions of Somalians into acute food insecurity, Alvaro Lario, the president of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, is now seeking to substantially strengthen its support to Somalia and resume its direct investment after loan arrears resulted in a 3-decade-long suspension. He was speaking during IFAD's 46th session of the Governing Council. According to the Integrated Phase Classification, 5.6 million Somalians are currently experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity, including 214,000 people considered in a situation very bad due to an unprecedented drought not seen in decades.
The Horn of Africa is experiencing the longest and most severe drought on record. High prices on food, fuel, and fertilizer are worsening the situation. I am proud to stand here today with the President of Somalia and to recognize that through the generous contribution of several IFAD members, Somalia will be able to access IFAD resources once more. This comes at a critical time when Somalia is facing increasing challenges to food security.
This engagement is an opportunity for a new dawn for Somalia, addressing major food security priorities in the country by investing very, very selected priority areas. The challenges of Somalia are too many, and what's required in order for Somalia to reach food self-sufficiency is not limited to the support of IFAD only, but IFAD is starting now the process of transitioning from humanitarian aid to development. This is the beginning.
If we just invest in the humanitarian the very right now and give just the food without the means and the investment for creating the opportunities to actually have the jobs and have the investments and the resources to invest, what the only consequence of that will be that we go from one crisis to the other. So the only way is to invest in that medium term, which in the case of food systems means investing in the entire value chain, how food is produced, but also how food is commercialized, how food is stored, and not only just on handing food.
The United Nations says countries in the Sahel region must do more to combat the trafficking of arms into the region. It adds the majority of weapons have been diverted from national armed forces in other African countries, notably Libya, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. It blamed both corruption and a low state presence for the inflow. An Islamist insurgency across Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Chad have claimed thousands of lives and displaced more than the UN said the jihadists were not primarily engaged in the trade and are unlikely to derive significant revenue from arms trafficking. Uganda's military has denied accusations of abducting and torturing an opposition activist 1 day after pictures emerged showing the victim with visible marks of torture on his chest. In a Twitter thread, opposition leader Bobi Wine had said his supporters was burnt and hot metals on the chest and metals were used to tear his skin. But the military spokesperson countered the saying. An international investigation found that the victim, Eric Mosiga, was not in the hands of any security agency. And back here in Nigeria, the Supreme Court has joined Katsina, Lagos, Cross River, Ogun, Ondo, Ekiti, and Sokoto states as co-plaintiffs in the suit challenging the Naira redesign policy of the federal government. Also, the Apex Court joined Edo and Bayelsa states in support of the federal government on implementation of the policy. The 6 states in their motions for joinder pitched their tents with Kaduna, Zamfara, and Kogi states, who had initially filed the suit. The 7-man panel, led by Justice John Okoro, also says that February 8 order barring the federal government from enforcing the February 10 deadline for the use of the old notes still stands. Our correspondent Kayla Migwa, who was in court earlier today, brings a recap of the day's proceedings.
No ruling today as expected by the Nigerian people, but the acceptance of a lot of these people who are joining the suit for a consolidated hearing, which is expected on the 22nd. That's next week, Wednesday. Justice John Okoro reminding the lawyers not to politicize this matter. Remember, the 22nd is just a few days to the elections, which will be holding on the 25th. And also asking the lawyers in court today to be mindful that this redesign policy, this Naira redesign policy, has had such a great impact on the Nigerian people. One that has caused a lot of suffering, especially in the rural areas, and saying that everyone should have that in mind and not just politics while they're having this particular conversation. In total, 9 states are joining this suit against the federal government, and this redesign policy, and 2 states are on the side of the federal government. Interestingly, the 9 states that are against this redesign policy are APC states, and the 2 states that are on the side of the federal government are PDP states. Remember, we are in an APC government, so this twist is a very interesting one that many Nigerians will be interested in seeing how it plays out. So ultimately, no ruling today, but accepting all these applications from states joining this suit, and a consolidated hearing expected on the 22nd of February. From the Supreme Court of Nigeria, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Ekabana is a shelter for children who have been accused of witchcraft in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. According to research, hundreds of thousands of children across Africa suffer such allegations every year.
After Ornella lost several family members over the space of 3 years, relatives and neighbors in her East Congo village of Kabari began suspecting the 14-year-old of witchcraft. The hushed rumors and purifying rituals that ensued prompted one of Ornella's brothers to take her to the police, concerned about the consequences the allegations could have on his sibling. Ornella, who did not wish to give her full name, was taken to a center in the nearby city of Bukavu named Ekabana that shelters approximately 60 children in the same situation.
There is a big difference between the way I lived at home and the way I am living here at Ekabana. At home, they don't know how to guarantee a child's rights. If they did, I would not have been blamed for everything or called a witch.
It is not uncommon in some African countries for frail children like Ornella, who suffers from a genetic form of anemia, to be considered a bad omen and blamed for the mishaps that hit isolated and impoverished communities.
At home, I was told that my illness was a pretext to better practice witchcraft. They did not take me to get medical treatment.
At the center, 15-year-old Francine remembers her shock when relatives suddenly started accusing her of killing an aunt and a grandmother with witchcraft.
My mother's younger sister had died, and they said that it was me who killed her. Then my grandmother died, and they said that I killed her too. Then when my friend Gladys' father died, they said that I killed him. Officials in the neighborhood told me that I was a wanted person and that if the community finds me, they would burn me alive. I was then advised to come here because of the situation at home.
For these children, Ekabana is a haven where they feel safe, and away from the rumors, they can thrive and enjoy the simple pleasure of playing and being children.
Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says that his country has launched a training course for diplomats and African countries as part of efforts to strengthen relations on the continent. On its website, the Foreign Ministry stated that a comprehensive 4-day online training course will be delivered at the Hennedy Diplomatic Academy in Udovenko. According to the ministry, the agreement was reached during the first ever tour of the Ukrainian foreign minister to African countries in October 2022. Ukraine has been trying to win support in Africa, where Russia has a much stronger foothold. Suspected Marburg cases near Guinea. We move to health in Cameroon now, where officials say that they have detected 2 suspected cases of Marburg virus close to the border with Equatorial Guinea, where there is an outbreak of the deadly hemorrhagic fever. Neither of the pair had traveled across the frontier. Officials are now trying to track down everyone they have been in contact with. The World Health Organization has sent more contact tracing teams to eastern Equatorial Guinea to try to contain the spread of this virus. 9 people are thought to have died from the disease in Equatorial Guinea, where a further 16 have been suspected to have it. Restrictions on movement had already been enforced in Cameroon's southern border area. And that's Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawodu.